Hello and welcome to On-Air with me, Muralee Nair, and your producer, Tenzin. The aim of On-Air is to bring you the quiet achievers, people who make a difference in this world, people who are inspired and who are inspiring. Today, we have a very special guest who is very involved in Indian theatre. His name, Sreekanth Gopalakrishnan. Welcome, Sreekanth.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show.
Now, I know that you've been very busy establishing a theatre company called the Great Indian Theatre. What is the Great Indian Theatre doing in Perth?
Now, the Great Indian Theatre Company has been established in 2022, and it's mainly comprising of people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and mostly people from the Indian community. It was established for two reasons, I would say. The first one being, we want to make sure that there is a platform for the abundance talent that we find in the community to find a wider Australian audience. And the second part is that I also feel that there is probably a requirement for more culturally diverse stories to be told to the Australian audience. And I feel that the stories that come from the Indian heritage and culture has lots of diversity. There's beauty, there is color, there is music. So I established theatre to make sure that these two objectives are met.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, I'm going to keep aside the part of storytelling,
Sure.
and I'm just going to focus for a little while on talent spotting.
Yeah.
How do you go about talent spotting these people whom you need front of stage as well as back of stage?
There's an abundance of talent here in Perth. Now, whether I take it within the Indian community, the broader South Asian community, or the wider Australian community, there's abundance of talent. For me, personally, to identify people who actually work with me, I have two things that I do. The first one is that year-long, I do quite a lot of workshops. I personally run lots of acting workshops, theatre workshops, and also workshops like playwriting workshops. So the participating people and the reason why I do and these are free workshops, by the way, so I don't charge for these workshops. And the reason I run these workshops is, one, I just want to spread the joy of theatre. And the second thing is that it is also my way of giving back to the community, because I feel that people actually buy tickets and come and watch my show and they are actually paying to watch what I want to say. So it's my way of giving back to the community. So these workshops actually bring in lots of people who are actually coming and doing theatre for the first time. So people are generally apprehensive. They haven't actually done acting. So I have many people who, like, for example, have the dream of standing on the stage doing theatre ever since high school, but they never had an opportunity because their life took them elsewhere. So they just come and say, I just want to try the workshop. And sometimes you will be very surprised that some of these people are extremely talented. And I did get very amazed at how they never actually had an opportunity to perform. So that's one way that I get to actually identify people through my workshop. The second one is that whenever I'm actually putting a formal production, and there's obviously an open audition that I do, I ensure that always there will be an open audition, and it is actually open to for people from any ethnicity, any background, any culture, as long as it fits the character. And that way also I have an opportunity to reach out to lots of people and identify talent, both on stage and also backstage.
Very, very comprehensive answer. Thank you. I think it gives an idea of how you draw people together, which is also the aim of online, because we want to draw people together and see the positive side of life in today's world where there's just so much negativity. Now, as stage productions go, you have staged two very big cast productions. The first called The Final Line in 2022, and the second, Crimson Gully, in 2024. Tell us about how, as a writer, director, you evolved from the first production to the second to what you're doing right now.
Very interesting question. The motivations for me for writing Final Line was very different from the motivations that I had for writing Crimson Gully. But in both cases, that what I have actually discovered was that when I was writing these narratives, I was a bit apprehensive in terms of how the audience would actually take it, because some of my plays discuss controversial social issues. It talks about some things that people are not ready to actually talk about it. So sometimes you don't know how the audience will accept it. But what I have actually discovered through my writings are that the audience, especially the Western Australian audience, are very mature, and they actually accept topics. They want to actually see diverse topics. They want to actually discuss issues as such. So I think that from Final Line to Crimson Gully, I have actually become, I think, more courageous. I am actually ready to explore into more bolder topics, and that actually, I think the audience has given me the liberty to actually go and deep delve into societal issues and talk about things that make them actually think and reflect on themselves.
Now, the Final Line obviously had a political setting.
Yeah.
Now, it's very different from Crimson Gully, which is more sociological. It basically was set in a brothel, with a madam and the girls who work in the brothel.
Yeah.
Now, why that particular theme?
See, again, I think, like I told before, you don't know what actually inspires you at what point. Now, I'll probably talk about my inspiration about both these plays. Now, again, I want to actually broadly talk about plays that actually make people think, rather than just a form as an entertainment. And I think that is a responsibility as a writer to give audience something to actually think about, and not just entertainment. You have a moral obligation to actually talk about societal issues, reflect on human emotions associated with it, and also give a broader perspective to people. So these two, the Final Line was more around the partition of India in 1947. It had lots of historical relevance to it, and I was inspired by inviting by visiting a museum in Amritsar. At the same time, the Crimson Gully was inspired by just watching a documentary put together by Deutsche Welle called The Indian Prostitution Villages. So both these things, like I said, has touched on two completely different things altogether, but it also reflects on what I told earlier, because with each and every performance that I've been actually doing, I'm getting more courage to actually talk about bolder topics, explore which more into the darker areas, which normally the society don't want to actually see being presented.
So, what next for the Great Indian Theatre? Have you evolved something? Do you have something in mind, or is it too soon to speak about?
No. And that if you're also a playwright, there's a difference if you're a playwright and a director. You're constantly thinking of something. So I have multiple inspirations at the moment that I'm actually working on. On a personal front, it has been a pretty busy first half of the year, with family visiting from India and the US and moving houses. So that probably took a step back in terms of my timelines of how I normally do. But certainly I'm working on a few topics. I think it's too early to probably talk about it. But as always, those will be topics which are a bit controversial, bit different from what normally you would expect to see in the WA theatre scene.
I think from our viewers' perspective, what is really noble about what Sreekanth is doing is really putting the spotlight on people who are in marginalized communities and who lead very marginalized lives. I mean, the pain of partition is something that you and I can't imagine. It is memories and scars that people who've gone through know how deep they run. Likewise, people who are brought up in the meanest of ways in societies, like in brothels, I mean, they are human too. And the fact that we have a Sreekanth Gopalakrishnan who is who's telling a story about them is really much appreciated. It's what brings the world together, because it's what makes people think. And I take your point that, as a playwright, you have a moral responsibility to provoke thought. And by provoking thought, hopefully giving positivity to it, and allowing people who are out there to take positive steps to make sure that life for everyone in this world is much better. Sreekanth, what madness or perfect insanity perhaps inspired you to bring the Indian themes, storylines, and experiences to be shared in Perth, Australia? What is the relatability factor?
Um, Now, most of the stories that I'm telling, obviously, I grew up in India and I have come from an Indian heritage, so I use that background to tell my stories. But I have realized that irrespective of what background that I use, there's quite a lot of themes which are quite universal. And I have actually got testaments after my shows from various people to substantiate that. I'll give you an example that, as you know, Final Line was more about the partition of India in 1947 and how people had to actually leave their homes and flee miles and migrate to a different place. Now, it resonated with quite a lot of people. So after the show, I had one of my colleagues who actually walked up to me and said that his parents migrated from to Western Australia during the World War II when the German invasion of Poland actually happened. So he said that it reminded him of the stories that his parents had actually told him. Now, it's a completely different cultural context, it's a completely different reason why some of those things have actually happened. But the mere fact that you have to actually leave your own home forcefully and actually migrate to a place looking for a better living for your family just connected deeply with him. So though he didn't have any understanding of what happened between India and Pakistan, what the partition was, that he could actually resonate with it. Similarly, when I did Crimson Gully, which again, like I said, I have used a very rural background in India, like a very semi-urban kind of background to actually tell the story of a brothel. I had somebody actually come up to and said that during the gold rush era in Australia, there were brothels established in Kalgoorlie because it was an upcoming mining town. And he said that some of the ways that the stories that you told is very similar to, and he actually worked in Kalgoorlie at that point, and he said that the stories actually resonates. This was pretty much like how Kalgoorlie is. So I even had a scene in Crimson Gully where I had the ladies actually walk out and actually call out to the men. And that's how in their profession they actually try to actually attract their customers in. He said that that actually scene reminded him of the old Kalgoorlie where they had brothels where there were ladies standing outside and actually calling men in. Now I was very fascinated. Now you're talking about a Western country like Australia and somebody actually a sex worker in Kalgoorlie you're talking about, and I'm showing something which is in a completely rural setup in India. Their cultures are different, their body language will be different, their traditions might be different, how they actually express themselves might be different, but there is a relatability factor. So I find it quite fascinating that people actually connect with some of these stories in a completely different layers altogether. And I always think that the human emotions are universals, and some of the themes that we're presenting are universal, irrespective of what background that you're actually telling the story from.
So there are two interesting points that you've made. One is that, there is a relatability factor as far as human emotions are concerned. So although we may look different, we may speak differently, there is a universality about human beings, and we are connected. And the important thing is to find that connectability. The other factor the other point that you made, which is very interesting, is that the scars that were carried 2 or 3 generations ago are still within us. It's within our DNA, or told, received stories, or whatever it might be. But it's interesting that these scars remain. And through storytelling, would you say that these scars can be sort of lightened?
I don't know, it's a very hard question to answer in terms of lighten, but some of these things, like for example, it's important that you actually remember them. It is important that you look back into history and remember where we come from and what probably happened to a few generations before. And I think it is like, just as an example, I have done some plays with which is based on mythology, in Hindu mythology. So there are kids who in the Indian community who grew up here, they probably don't have that exposure and the background. So they actually help them understand in terms of what's the background that the parents have been actually raised, or how their great grandparents are coming from. So I think that while some of these things actually may not actually heal anything or probably, but it's good to actually just understand your roots better, help you actually reconnect with the past, which I think is important because our life can become very busy and we just move on. So it's always good to pause for a second and actually just look back from where you actually come from. And I think storytelling is a very powerful tool for doing this.
In establishing Indian theatre here in Perth, Sreekanth, what are your experiences and learning you've taken to heart from Australia? From the stage, the artists, the technical aspects of production here?
Yeah, see, I've been actually doing theatre for decades now, but I've been pretty active in the Western Australian theatre scene for a few years now. So one of the things that I figured out was that just to give you some numbers, there's probably around 50 to 60 different community theatres here. There are lots of independent theatre groups in WA. There are lots of professional theatres companies here, but the representation of probably diverse, culturally and linguistically diverse groups within this is quite small. So one of the first learnings that I had when I started actually being part of the WA theatre scene is that if you look at the current modern Australia, the immigrant population have actually built in a very vibrant and cultural scenario in Australia, but that representation probably may not be there in every sphere of space, and theatre is one of them. And it is slowly evolving. But like I said, if you're an actor and you want to be cast in a play in WA, that you will find that because of your ethnicity, there is not many roles that you could actually play unless and until like the theatre group is actually open to it. So, which I think that there needs a requirement for more stories to be told from a culturally diverse background. There requires to be more inclusion of some of these kinds. So, one of the things I first learned was that there is a requirement to have these kind of stories to be told. Now, working with the wider Australian audience, I think that there's some brilliant talents out here, not just in the Indian community, but outside it, especially from the technical side. I have learned quite a lot working with Australian artists, especially in the fields of lighting, in the fields of stage designing and set designing. Those are some of the aspects that people, especially from the Indian community in the theatre space, is probably lacking. There's plenty of actors, but on the technical side. So I have learned quite a lot from that. And so I think that the part of the requirement for the inclusion or the need of actually developing more tech skills backstage and the technical is one of the important learning that I had over the several years that I worked now.
Sreekanth, in bringing people together, what has been your experience? I mean, at the end of the day, theatre, from what you are doing as a writer, as a director, as a producer, is also about project management.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the different personalities, the different traits that people bring to pursue a common good?
I think for me the experience has been really amazing, and I'll give you examples of Final Line, because Final Lines, we were talking about the story where the British India was actually leaving and the India was granted independence and it was getting partitioned in India and Pakistan. I obviously needed quite a lot of actors to play the British men. So I had to actually cast several Australian men for it. So that actually brought a very different, diverse and perspective to how the play was done. So I had quite a lot of senior actors working with me who have probably done 50 or 60 shows, but they have probably not worked with such a diverse group of people. And it is amazing that how people, when they have a common goal and an objective of actually making a wonderful play presented to the audience, they gel together and come together. And I feel that this has been a very gratifying experience, and I take lots of pride in being able to bring so many people together who, many of them were strangers in the beginning, and through nights of rehearsals, laughters, creative challenges, experiences, lots of food, we actually come together. And I think that, like you said, it is a project management, but I think that once you enjoy the experience and you like that people meeting part of it, it is also a wonderful experience.
Sreekanth, the amazing thing about speaking with you is that you have looked at various experiences in very remote parts of India, and you have brought these stories to the remotest city in the world, Perth, Australia. Now, the question that I have for you is that how will you, or do you think it can happen that you can then take these stories back to the world, to different parts of the world?
Of course, I would love to. Now, again, I need to be realistic that though we've been doing this for a couple of years, we're still a very young and emerging theatre company. We have miles to go, but I think we made a good start. We have actually started developing a very niche audience. We have started developing an audience who probably appreciate seeing culturally diverse stories out there. I would love to at some point to make sure that we are able to actually do a tour in Australia. We are hopefully do wider shows where we can actually reach out to the global audiences, but baby steps at a time. I think we made a good start, but yeah, the opportunities are probably infinite.
Sreekanth, I know that you have a very young family. How do they cope with your busy schedule?
Oh God, good question. Now, it's usually tough, and I think that anybody who probably migrated to Australia, where you have your wider family not with you, like your parents or your relatives back in India, you are just a nuclear family trying to support the kids and the various things. You wear a number of hats. Like I'm a father, or my husband. I do a full-time day job, but the passion of theatre makes me coming back and doing this more. So it's hard sometimes, but I think my family has been very supportive. Not my kids, they're really young, so they still complain, especially during rehearsals, that I don't spend enough time at home. But then I also have some really great friends who've been actually supportive in all this thing. So yeah, it is hard, but I think that you just wear multiple hats and try your best to do everything.
Excellent. Sreekanth, you have a online presence for the great Indian theatre.
Yeah.
Well, I hope our viewers will follow Sreekanth on his Facebook, I believe.
Yeah.
The Great Indian Theatre. And if you feel that you want to have a read of The Final Line or Crimson Gully and see if you want to stage it, maybe via the Facebook you can contact Sreekanth Gopalakrishnan and see how you can collaborate. Now the aim of O-N-Nair is to bring people together in a positive setting with positive vibes. Thank you for listening. I'm going to sign off now on air with Muralee Nair and my good producer Tenzin.
Like, comment, and subscribe.